appreciate that. I'll tell you what, I've never lost a project before because of being on podcasts, but I can no longer say that, so that's why we weren't chosen, I assume. I forgot about that, but I do remember it being hilarious. So anyway, Doug, thank you. Yes, again, my name is Dennis Burns, Pulse Design Group. We're happy to sponsor the owners panel discussion today. We're always excited to be a part of DBIA. I'd like to take a minute and tip of the cap to our current DBIA Mid-America Region President. He's a co-worker, teammate, good friend of mine, works at Pulse Design Group, Matt Meyer, and also we've got in here Ross Netzel. Ross, also with Pulse Design Group, an up-and-comer. He is currently co-chair of the Next Gen piece within DBIA. So thanks guys for keeping things rolling, and Pulse Design Group is happy to be here. This owners panel discussion, this is where I'm going to try to get some information about how all of us as practitioners can get an edge on what they're thinking about when not only deciding to use design build delivery method, but how do they choose a team? What are they looking for in a team? What inspires them? How do we understand what they're looking for in certain presentations, interviews, RFQ responses, etc. So there's a lot to talk about, and before we go any further, it's important that we know who we're dealing with. So we're going to go forward and ask for some self-introductions. Makes the most sense to just go right down the line. We'll start with Stacy Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stacy Smith. I work for ODOT. I'm a project director in the St. Louis district. So my opinions and experiences are mostly focused on St. Louis, so I'm not necessarily the voice of ODOT. But I've been at ODOT about 15 years.
That's good.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Troy Schulte. I'm the county administrator for Jackson County. I don't have a mic, so usually I can use my outside voice when it works. I'm the county administrator for Jackson County. I've been in that role almost 5 years. In a previous life, I was the city manager for Kansas City, Missouri for 10 years. So I have a great deal of experience in most of the large public-private design build projects that have gone on in Kansas City, in the surrounding area over the last decade or so. Streetcar, Kansas City International Airport, the terminal, the convention center, hotel. We are currently building a $300 million new detention center with our partners at J.E. Dunn and DLR on a design build basis. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the purposes of this discussion, I was elected mayor of Lenexa last November. I had served previously on the city council there since 2019. Many of you may know Mayor Mike Bain was choosing to retire and wasn't delicate in asking me to succeed him in that position, so I was happy to do it. In my normal life, I am an interior designer by education and certification, and own Compass, which is a commercial furniture dealer. So somewhat from your world and now serving the public in Lenexa.
Good afternoon. My name is David Wakefield, architect by background, and currently working at MAR Design Build for the last 3.5 years. I am an owner's representative. In fact, I'm representing Troy Schulte in Jackson County on their detention center project right now, and I've been working on large-scale vertical public sector design build projects probably the better part of the last 7 years.
Awesome. Have a round of applause for our panel here today. So, Stacey, we're going to start with you. And we had a wonderful conversation the other day, and you said something that stuck with me. And you may have heard this before, maybe it's within your own firms, but you said something like, design build is not for everyone. And then there was a further discussion that followed. So, it's a true story, right? Everyone says, yeah, we're design build, we're good at that, no problem. Well, we're talking both from a practitioner standpoint, but also internally at MODA. So tell us a little bit more about kind of what you meant by design build is not for everyone.
Sure. I think that where I was going with that was, as a state DOT, the Missouri DOT, for 100 years, we've been very successful at designing bid cheapest possible product. And you all, as practitioners, as the contractor, you're trying to make the most money, right? And so inherently, we're going to disagree, to put it mildly, and have to figure that out. And so to be good at bid build is a very different skill set. And then you come to the design build world, and it's more of a high tide raises all ships. If I'm not getting great value as the owner, and you're not making money, then one or both of us is doing this wrong. And so, and there are plenty of people that can do both really well. And MoDOT and the industry needs people who can do bid build really well. And it also needs, because that's not going away. I'm a Missouri state taxpayer. We like to know where our money is going. We want the government to be as efficient as possible. And efficiency usually is translated to low cost. But, so bid build's here to stay. And we also need people that are going to design buildings. We do get great value on certain projects from them. So I think that was, just because you may struggle with one doesn't mean you're not valuable doing the other well. I know I would struggle with bid build because I'm not interested in it when I'm doing that. But some people are, and that's fine too.
Awesome, thanks. So Dan, as a Newmark Zimmer, as an owner's rep, at what you do, talk about what you look for in your design build teams, perhaps on the front end. I mean, do you interview a lot? Are you in the room and there's presentations happening time to time?
Yes, so in my position, I do find myself in quite a few design build interview processes for different projects. Sometimes as just an advisory capacity, or sometimes as one of the selection committee members casting a vote for one firm or the other. I think the key things that, in my experience, people are looking for, beyond the obvious, the qualifications you've done before, but is it truly a team? Because I think there's a fear with design build. I got to live with this marriage of CM and architect. Can they get along? Do they have past experiences together? That's a key. And then I would say that I have seen teams talk themselves out of the job, so to speak, based on approach. I think that is a big intangible that's hard to define. And maybe for the folks that are in the room, the best we get around that is find those owners before that opportunity is closed to you and talk to them and understand them. In my experience, once the owner has made that decision that design build is going to be for us, DMR is not for us, design build is what we want. We think that's where the value is, whether it be because of the schedule or control cost, risk, whatever the factor. Once they've made up their mind and have a certain path that they've established for themselves, you need to prove that you can walk that path. I've seen the teams come and say, well, we appreciate what you have said. Here's how we would approach it. And I think that's a risky bridge to cross at times with the design build, because you have an owner who may be experienced, but maybe not, or taking this leap of faith that this is the right delivery method for them, and they've pretty well set their mind to it.
Troy, you were nodding your head a bit when Dan mentioned something. You've seen teams during an interview talk themselves kind of out of a project. What does that mean?
Well, we have a very recent example. We had gone through an extensive planning process led by Newmark Zimmer and their partnership that had gone through the whole process of what it takes to build a brand new detention center, build that next generation facility. Went through the procurement process, qualification-based selections, making the interviews. A very good team, but the architect on that team basically got up and said, well, if I were doing it, we'd completely change the approach. And here's what we do. And I throw out all the work that we've done. And my committee, which was county staffers that had been involved in this process for 3 years, said, so you're telling
last 3 years, doesn't matter. Guess where they finished? In a vote of two firms where they finished. And so that approach, I think, as Dan mentioned, is important that you understand where your customers at and where they're at in the process, so that you don't come in and say, well, we're going to take you through a comprehensive design process. We're going to teach you how to build a next generation detention center facility. And the group had already done that for 3 years. And so now we ended up with a great team. We had 2 great teams that were bidding on it, but it was that ability to talk past the sale and not understand what your potential client was wanting. It was an important argument to make sure that, it's a $300 million project, because he was like, well, we need to basically start. And that didn't play well. And I wasn't even one of the voting members, and I said, well, there goes that project. So the after-action conversation with the CM on that was, tell your architect to be quiet, you can't do that. So that would be my approach: know your customer and know where they're at in the process and understand what they've been through to get to that point and make them a stronger candidate to go through that final step.
That's a tough loss. I mean, geez, all the effort, all the practice, all the rehearsal, all the submissions, all the work, and then foot in mouth. That's tough. Anyway, let's learn. Write that down. Okay, well, good. So, Julie, in your role, you have an interesting perspective. You're a business owner. You're in the AEC industry with the Compass on the furniture side. So there's that angle. But now, congratulations, by the way, mayor of the Nexa. That's amazing. So how do you toggle between those 2 roles? And the projects are upcoming and you're aware of the delivery method. I'm not going to get into an ethics situation here, but how do you balance those 2 roles? Business owner, participator, mayor.
I mean, the Venn diagram has a big overlap, right? And that's part of the reason why I think that the public understood my messaging when it came to campaigning for this office last year, is that design at its core is solving problems and understanding the needs of your clients or constituents or whomever it is, and doing so in a defined set of constraints and with a defined budget. And public safety is public service is just the same. So we look at things in the Lexa through that lens, understanding that we have to be true to our values and what we have to deliver to the public, and I think that designers function the exact same way.
Now, in the Nexa, majority of the projects are coming out for a CM at risk delivery, but still an alternative model. Have you ever thought about design on any projects?
Yeah, I think as we were discussing in our last panel discussion, CMAR is just kind of what's palatable for us from a political perspective. We are a pretty high-functioning client. We like to maintain a certain level of control and involvement. As the owner, we like to hire an owner's rep on certain high-profile projects. So CMAR is just what's comfortable for us at this point. I think that we absolutely recognize the value of having the whole team together from the beginning to deliver the best outcome, but just want to make sure that there's some guardrails in the process that are pertaining for us.
Okay. And then Stacy, we talked about your, this is the quote here, you said, just because we use design build doesn't mean everybody likes it. So kind of piggybacking off what Julie said, expand on that. Because I think that was more of an internal statement, right? To your point about being a palatable approach. So what does that mean, Stacey?
Sure. We've been doing design build projects for almost 20 years now for the DOT. And there's a sense that it is true that as an agency, when we choose design build, we are giving up some control. We're also giving up risk. We keep preaching to the choir, I'm sure. And so there's a challenge internally, individually, to be comfortable with giving up control. As government agents, I said this in the last thing, we're not trained to be good at flexibility. We're not valued for our flexibility, right? We're valued by how well we can follow standards and dot our i's and cross our t's. And so the both internally and externally, I think they're quite the same angst about it still feels like a new delivery that we will be doing it for a lot of our DOT people's careers. That
Now, there's a threshold in MoDOT. There's two large projects you talk about currently underway. One's at 52 million, the other at 62 million, design, build, delivery. But how do you go about determining, and I might feel free to jump in, the rest of the panel on this question. How do you go about determining which projects make most sense? Is it contract value? Is it risk? Is it all of it? What's the process?
Sure. Those are just the two that I have led. We have much larger ones that James is running in the back, and our largest agency is over billions. And our smallest was 14 or 15 million. As for how we decide, the University of Colorado, or a university in Colorado, created a process. It's called a project delivery determination workshop, and several other states use it now. We've tailored it to MoDOT. I mean, it basically looks for obstacles and opportunities for all the delivery methods that that state has available to them. So in the case of MoDOT, it's just design, build, and design, bid, build. We look at cost, at schedule, at I'm trying to remember what else. Risk, need for control, third parties. What obstacles does design, build, or bid, build present for this project, and what opportunities are there? And then in the St. Louis district, we actually have a formal team, roughly the same people each time. You know, a project is identified as a possible design build candidate. We go through that, and then I'll make a recommendation based on the conversation with that team to our district leadership, to state leadership, and it's actually our commission that makes the final decision if it's going to be a design build project.
Dan, you spent time in Johnson County. Is it the same approach on deciding when to use design build and when not?
With Johnson County, honestly, design build is not probably their preferred delivery method. They have done it twice. The courthouse being the most recent one. Before that, they've done an office project. But they really, all these people like that participation, you know, roll their sleeves up approach, and they do it a lot. With the courthouse in particular, it's actually that decision really came about from a steering committee that was formed on the leadership levels early on, well before really anybody was involved. The project team hadn't quite been formed, but they were busy talking about programming, and you know, they weighed the pros and cons on the sort of top down, and their biggest thing was speed and the schedule at that time. So it was the election of November 2016. And they felt like, ooh, we got a lot of work coming. KCI is coming. You know, we want to get out in front of as many people as we can, make sure that labor pool doesn't go away. So that for them was their largest driver. And then, you know, in their normal fashion, still rolled up their sleeves and said, well, we still want some control. So they did the best with it, but that was a particular
Troy, you mentioned that the detention center, there were two folks competing at the end of the day, but when you're deciding in Jackson County or even the city of Kansas City, perhaps, are you looking ahead into the market to determine how adept the design builders are in the city, in the county, in the region? So before going that route, are you looking in the market to see who can do it and who can't?
Yes, I think you have to be, to help mitigate that risk, that owner risk, of that trading off of the, well, we don't necessarily know what we're going to build. You've got to look to a partner that has been there before. And so, from a Kansas City and from a Jackson County perspective, I guess, since the commonality is me, the perception of when I want to pursue a design build issue is really the more complex the project, the greater the number of stakeholders I have, the more rigid the budget is in terms of inflexibility, the more likely I am going to use a design build approach, simply because I've got to have those overarching controls. And I give you a recent example on the detention center. We had a project, we went out to bid for procurement for the design build, and we had a design budget, design build to a budget, a maximum. Dan can tell me the exact word of what that was. And it had a GMP of $256.5 million. It had taken a while for legislative support to get there, but we had got that in. We were going to build 1,244 beds for $256.5 million. Picked our provider. It was J. Dunn. J. Dunn started the process, came back to us and said, and of course we're right in the middle of COVID. We're in the post-COVID inflation spikes, which played havoc with construction pricing in this thing, and said, oh, by the way, that $256 million project is now a $330 million project. And so, but in a situation, had that been a design bid build type of a project, where bids would have come back based on the design, my sense was the project would have collapsed. Because it would have said, we don't have any money, and we don't have the expertise in the county to tell us, how do I take a $330 million project and make it into a $256.5 million project and still achieve our objectives? So the advantage of having that design build team in there was we started to build scenarios. You want this, it's going to cost you this. So we were able to have an iterative process. We ended up with a $301.2 million project with 1,000 beds that still checked all the boxes, maybe didn't get everything that we wanted in terms of the number of beds, but we got a portability of design, we got something that will, if the financial situation of the county changes, we can add on beds at a particular point, so we've got basically an expandable structure that says, all right, we've got something, and I'm not convinced without that design build approach team in place, the ability to work through the issue would have been resolved. It would have simply collapsed because they said, well, we only have $256.5 million. The bid came in at $330 million. We're stuck. We would have probably gone back and tried to, redesign it, but that would have taken years at more expense, and I think we would have lost it. So to me, that the value of that design build firm was the ability to say, all right, we got an anomaly in the market. How do we solve? How do we fix that anomaly collectively? And there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth in the county, and everybody, well, you told us you could build it for $256.5 million, and I said, well, that was before construction materials went up 25%. Over labor costs doubled. All of those issues that we went through in that post-pandemic recovery. We ended up with a project that was allowed to move forward, and I think those are that was that intrinsic value of a design build team, and a traditional design bid build process. Because we had other design bid build processes coming in. We got the price back from the contractors. They were double, 2/3 more than what and guess what, the project went on the shelf. It didn't get done. So having that design build firm at the available to say, all right, what do we do to pull this thing back down? I think kept that project on track.
So Dan, establishing budgets early is critical, but in this case here, that's tough. But again, there's a pandemic involved, so that's different. But and I don't want this to be just a detention center discussion, because there's a lot of relevant information here. So establishing budgets early, but this project is utilizing the progressive best value approach. Talk about how that all kind of came together.
Well, that was an education process that our team had to bring the county up to speed, because it was their first design build project that maybe ever, Troy. alluded to, when the budget became problematic, there was the reflex and the instinct, let's go back 12 ago, why can't we bid this? But we had, I think, explained and put the legwork in to explain this is the best value approach, this is get you what you want. And what that means is, we effectively, we signed pre-con, scope to work with the design builder. They established, that gets the work going, the budget's going, and then we work towards what ended up being that $301 million overall guaranteed maximum price. But to get the legislature comfortable with this approach, it's more than we thought it was going to be. This is new to us. Where are the checks and balances? Each phase, each component package, whether it be the site work, the structure, foundations, footings, going vertical, the enclosure, and then eventually finishes. Let's go present that component package that cumulatively builds that $301 million GMP. So at every point they have that opportunity to, weigh that this is still in their best interest, make sure that they haven't left the road, so to speak, and basically prove that value on a number of steps along the way, all within that initial enrollment cost.
So Julie mentioned, you felt like having, it's kind of related, but I don't know if it would solve this issue with the Jackson County budget, but you said that it would be great if governing bodies were a little more intentional about potentially having designers and or builders on board, whether they run for office or I'm not sure, what that looks like from your chair, but talk us through that.
Yeah, so we were in a similar situation at the exact same time where we were moving forward with our Justice Center project. And the mayor then seated me on that committee to help select our design contractor teams, to sort of help educate my fellow governing body members about what it was going to mean to release the project in several different GMP packages, because at the time the steel needed to be ordered because it was a 200-week lead time, and it's a little bit difficult to get folks who are teachers and accountants and are elected for other reasons to understand some of how this process works. So I thought that experience was intrinsically valuable because I was able to sort of help inform the process in the selection of the teams, and then to help move the project forward from the political side of getting my colleagues to understand what needed to be done to move it forward, and the sort of budget adjustments that would take place as a result of that. So just having design professionals to sort of help grease the wheels, I think, is a valuable aspect that I think every governing body everywhere could use.
And you said that design is somewhat of a public service, right?
I mean, solving problems within a constrained set of budgets is all we do all day long.
Stacy, how can you tell a good design build team from a bad one?
Oh boy.
You have no pressure.
Are there any?
Not here.
Now, I don't get to pick based on the people, right? So when MoDOT evaluates a proposal, so we do a two-phase design build process, usually fixed price, we occasionally support cost, but usually it's a fixed price design build project. And we evaluate based on the scoring that we set forth in the RFP. But on the two design build projects that I led, it was clear who really heard and believed what MoDOT, me specifically the project director, was saying in the one-on-one meetings. And that was reflected in their proposal. So, no matter how well I write the RFP, it's really those one-on-one meetings that you can really suss out who the project is and what needs what the project needs to be successful as represented by meeting 19. And so really coming into those meetings, having done your homework and made assumptions and worked through those, but then ready to set those all aside and really hear what the person is saying, I think is really what makes a good team. And then also, it's clear, this is no guarantee of success, but it's also clear the teams that have a good camaraderie, whether they work together before or not. And those teams really seem to come up with really good ideas and really push us hard as well, which is one of those as well, is really test MODA to see if we believe what we're saying and if we're going to hold to that factor.
MoDOT does something that's pretty interesting, and maybe other DOTs across the country do this, but I think it's heady, it makes a lot of sense, you're getting better every time out, and you refer to it as additional applicable standards. What does that mean?
Yes, so the way Missouri DOT does design build, I think is a lot, we have a lot more freedom in our legislation than other states. And so we really are looking for, in that case specifically, we're looking for, if you've seen another state do something, such as, hey, in the case of our first design build project, they brought us an additional standard barrier, roadway barrier from Caltrans, California DOT. And that's now our standard barrier. They brought it during the procurement process and said, hey, this is, presumably it was advantageous to the construction of it. It's a taller barrier and more durable. And so MoDOT reviewed it and said, yeah, go ahead and use this, and it is included in the proposal. So we're always looking for, it's easier if it's another state DOT, because then we know that some federal highway division has approved it, but it could be a city or anything else. So we're really eager for, to see what you all are experiencing around the country, so that MoDOT can continue to grow as well.
So several things are popping out repeatedly, right? It's listening to the client, it's understanding what the intent of the overall project is, it's also doing some research about what else may have been done in other parts of the country or state, and bringing all this information back. But at the end of the day, it's people. We're in the people business, and that's just the way it works. So, Troy owners establish budgets in a lot of different ways, and an adequate budget is extremely difficult, as we just talked about. What is your approach and what are your expectations when heading down the path and establishing your budgets?
Well, I think in that respect, it's to have a pretty good idea of what the need is going forward. You're going to have to spend a little bit of money on what I call the pre-planning work. Newmark Zimmer, CGL is our design consultant, but we brought in, when we did the streetcar, we had some preliminary planning done by Burns and McDonnell. When we did the airport, we had preliminary planning done by Burns and McDonnell. So we had, I think, having a framework of knowing, as an owner, making sure you know what you're getting into. Don't ask the private sector to solve all your problems and give you the number. You better have a feel of what it's going to take to get this delivered, that you can get a project that you won't end up being disappointed in because you cut too fine of a cloth on the front end. So having some flexibility to work on that budget up front and say, this is a realistic number to get us what we want. It won't get us the Cadillac, but it'll get us a solid Buick in the old logic of where I come from. So, and I think that's the framework of having that work with some folks, whether they're a design consultant that's been on board, if you've got staff that have gone through this and can do it, just talking to people. I think that's that work of,
from a public sector official, being able to just have contact with the engineering and the design community or once in a while, just to bounce an idea off of and say, hey, we're thinking about this building, or we're thinking about this need here, and you guys following up saying, well, here's what a municipality, here's what Fort Lauderdale, Florida did, or here's what Pasadena, California did, just passing along that information. I know as someone who does that, I will simply say, well, that's good information, I'll pass it along to staff, but more importantly, when it comes time to procure for that project, I will say, well, make sure that particular group gets an opportunity to bid on this project, because they provided this good free bonus services, pro bono services on the front end. Let's make sure they get a chance to participate on the back end. And I've always, again, that relationship basis of being able to work with people that you've worked with for a number of years. They'll give you a straight answer. They're not going to try to hoodwink you. They're not going to undercut it to sell you something that you won't, that you'll put on the back end. Having that relationship on the front end, I think, as much in advance really helps you down the road, and culturing those, cultivating those folks and making certain I'm a resource. It's not going to cost you anything, but here's an idea. Here's something similar that might give you a framework. And it was X dollars per square feet, or here was your construction costs, and that helps that framework. And all of those projects, design build projects that I've been involved in over the years, have always started with conversations with the design and engineering community going, here's the need. What do you think I'm going to need in terms of a framework to make this thing happen? And they were usually honest and coming back and saying that, and that always gave us a starting point that then we could then get somebody on board to help us refine it and get us to a better number. But that was that early conversation. Is, well, classic example of, when we built the streetcar in Kansas City, it was like, well, let's go find somebody that's actually built one of these things. We didn't have to go that far. We had to go to St. Joe. But that was where that conversation started. So, hey, we're looking for some ideas about what it would take to be a 2.5 mile starter line from here to here, and what do you think of it, what it ought to do. And it was a real easy, quick, painless conversation. But 2 years later, it resulted in a contract that we now have a functioning streetcar system. But it's those conversations responding to that individual request. Never know where that's going to end up. And that was always that give and take between the engineering community, the design community, and the public sector. And I think ended up with a lot of helping us on that planning sessions on the front end, making it as well down the road, even after. So it doesn't have to be that formal procurement process. It really just has to be that ongoing conversation. Just say, hey, we're a resource. We're in town and we're a resource. And that is a tremendous advantage to public sector officials. If they know they got somebody that's been in town, they can just say, got an idea, what do you think? That is a tremendous benefit for the parties.
I mean, this is why these owner panels are so powerful, in my opinion. You just were handed, which is not actually rocket science, but you were just handed some key information in terms of the power of a relationship and being somewhere early and consistent, offering some work and wisdom and past history, and being readily available. It's again, it's not hard, but it kind of is. You need the accessibility. It's all about timing. But that's why these discussions, I think, are just really helpful for this organization and all of us in the community. But Julie, obviously, getting to the table early, Design Build boasts a lot of those advantages. Being early, it's quicker, it's time saver, all these different things. But from your perspective, being at the table early is it's paramount.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the context of any public project, it's essential because you have to set budgets and get governing body approval and all of that. And I see that on the design side too. And what I do with furniture is that we are still kind of one of the last industries where people get through the entire process and then bid furniture at the end, and they're sick or shocked about how much it costs, and people are racing to the bottom. And we still are trying to tell the story of, as soon as you're hiring your design build team, hire your furniture dealer as well, and make sure that all costs are captured and that everybody knows how much everything is going to cost, so that electrical is coordinated, everybody knows sort of what the owner-provided stuff is going to be, and that really doesn't happen as much as we would like to still. So that's what my panel discussion was on this morning.
Oh, nice. Well, that was easy then, wasn't it? Great. So Dan, you are currently co-chair of Owners Council, DBIA, so that's awesome. Thank you for that. But staying in tune and up to date on all things design build, it takes a lot of effort. Of course, organizations like this are important, but from your perspective as a professional, and this is what you do, any suggestions about how to stay best in tune, or maybe how you do it?
Well, the efforts of the Owners Council the last couple of years, I think, have really been externally focused on providing, people in this room and beyond the resources, the access to that information, so that we all can raise our level of understanding and excellence in this. So, if there's an interest, certainly we welcome you to reach out to us and ask that you join us in that effort. Even if it's just a question that we can help you address, we can help, to what Troy said, we want you in the right direction. So we're all about being that bridge to outreach to the owners group, so the owners in this community know what the benefits of design build are, but also help just bring up the education level for all of us so that we can all advocate and make the best decisions.
Without owners involved in the organization, it's really hard for us to kind of get better at it. So that's why any event we have within DBIA and all the organizational chapters across the country, owners in the room are the most powerful conversation we can have, because these are the decision makers. Now we got just like 5 or 6 minutes left. It's that 5 or 6 minutes of time between this conversation finishing and the beers, okay? So we're going to focus. I need you to just sit upright. We're going to make it. It's going to be fine. So in closing, just want to hear some perspectives. I'm certain they'll be different for each of you. Stacey, we'll start with you. The state of the industry, maybe not so much about the amount of work that's out there, because there seems to be a lot. You can touch on that if you'd like. Where do you see the industry, the AEC industry, from the chair that you sit in?
From the St. Louis perspective, I guess I would say I'm really interested in years to come. My experience is limited to MoDOT's relationship with the industry, and so MoDOT several years ago was at risk of not bringing in enough state tax to even match the federal disbursements. So all of us were about to lose a whole lot of money. And so companies, I think, shrank and were moved out of town, and now all of a sudden we got a new gas tax. The federal law gave us more money, and then the state legislature passed an almost $3 billion package to widen I-70 across the state. And so the industry is doing an excellent job trying to catch back up. We've all been kind of caught off guard by that, but I think just the relationships, the experience I've had with the design build contractors and consultants in St. Louis, it's just, they're working really hard and there's great expertise. Enjoy working with them.
Yeah, how do you see it, Troy? Maybe a different perspective. What may be missing from the industry as you see it? Are we doing what we can do? Are we getting better every time out? What's your take on that?
Well, I think one of the things that what you're seeing now from elected officials is a kind of and you're seeing this in the public sector, is a desire to perform, that people want instantaneous results. They want kind of immediate gratification. And our normal governmental procurement processes are very lengthy, they're protracted, they're stodgy, they're designed to protect, kind of, as mentioned, get to that lowest possible cost structure. But that's a conflict with what I think the public is demanding is, what have you done for me? How come this isn't built? The old conversation about, all I ever see are the orange cones of the road. I never actually see anybody work, and I always just see the orange cones of the road. And so I think what we've got to figure out as public sector folks is, and
And to me, that's where design build comes along, where the private sector can step in and say, you know, here's what I need it on this, I need it on such and such a date. Really just release the private sector to be aggressive in doing those kind of things. And I think that will allow the latitude that the public sector needs to be able to be perceived as being responsive. The process of whether it was building a streetcar or building a detention center is lengthy behind the scenes. The public never sees it until they start to see the media coverage of, oh my God, there's an issue with the jail, or we're losing flights, or all of these issues, and what's the immediate response? So the public sector has to be responsive in terms of doing that long-term planning to get in place to answer these questions beforehand. The private sector can help the public sector in terms of being able to say, here's what you ought to think about, and here's what you ought to, if you're going to do this, here's what you ought to bring to the table. But more importantly, I think we from the public sector have got to be more willing to share the risk and let the private sector take some of these issues and say, we need a quick response. This can't be, you know, I think MoDOT's challenge will be, as they rebuild I-70, it can't be a 10 or 15-year project, because people will be, I can't get to Columbia for my football game, and MoDOT can't fix the roads. And that's the response. You've got to figure out a way to get you've got to align performance with expectations. And quite honestly, the public has unrealistic expectations about the government and how fast they can do it right. The trouble is, we don't get a choice. We have to meet those expectations or find a better way to get quicker with those expectations. And I think that's where a design build approach is, you give me the dollars, I'll deliver the project. That's going to be very appealing to more and more public sector officials. It certainly is in my case to say, I got this problem, I got X amount of dollars, you take my problem off my plate so I can move on to the latest, whether it's a Russian cyber hack or, you know, the property taxes in Jackson County, or, you know, or if there's a stadium, what the hell are we going to do about our stadium? I got a litany of issues in Jackson County. Having somebody take this particular problem off my plate and the elected officials' plate and say, I'll deliver it on time and on budget for what you want, from a headache relief factor is huge. And I think that's where the private sector needs to be in a position to say, you give me the resources, I'll deliver the project on time, and I'll deliver it and get close to those citizen expectations.
That's awesome. Julie.
I've got good news on two fronts. So I believe that I'm the canary in the coal mine on the office market. Any developer you talk to will say that the office is dead forever, and there's no evidence to support that on my balance sheet. We've been as busy as we've ever been in the last 3 years, but it's different. So companies are using place as a tool to get people back together, to re-examine their corporate culture, to make sure that their young people are being mentored properly. I don't believe that people are going to work from home forever. I'm staking my life on it. So watch for me to be wrong on that. I'll bet y'all's fears. The second part from the public side is that the Midwest is open for business. And we had a panel this morning on the Panasonic plans. I think that as we see a more concerted effort to move big manufacturing back to North America, the I-35 channel is going to continue to be busy and the hotbed of activity for decades to come, certainly as it continues to manufacturing and all the money that we hopefully are going to receive as a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Here locally, you didn't see the Mid-America Regional Council submitted a $200 million grant application for public projects related to green infrastructure, all that sort of thing. So fingers crossed on that. But I think that that's really going to continue because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get that federal money and spend it here in our communities. And then just to watch what else happens as far as manufacturing, research, innovation here in the Midwest.
Great answer. All right, Dan, take us home, would you?
The last thing between the applause and so I'll just be very short. I'm enthusiastic about the state of our industry and the engagement. I think that what I notice is increasingly numbers of the young professionals are their talent level, what they can very tumultuous times, and always positive and negative, but everything's good about the state of where we are and the future leadership in this community.
Awesome. Really great conversation.